Going on school trips costs a lot, especially if you go to a private school. You're probably not used to these expenses since you went to public school. It might be too much for you to pay for it. But don't worry, I'll feed you a souvenir. The teacher in charge of my daughter's class is really straightforward, but sometimes he sounds like he's talking down to her. No one should talk down to or ignore others, especially not a teacher to a student. I'm Natalie. My brother and I were left without parents when we were young because they died in a bad car crash. I was only 8, and my brother was 15. After our parents died, our relatives had to figure out what to do with us. We didn't have many family members, and no one had enough money to take care of both of us. They said, "We can't handle both of them because we're struggling to raise even one." They already had 2 kids of their own, so having twice as many was out of the question. We realized that all we had left in life was each other. I was just a 3rd grader, clinging tightly to my brother. I cried constantly, and he felt helpless seeing me go through so much. At 15, he was barely an adult, and I was still a child. He could only do so much to help. After a while, one relative agreed to take me in. "Sorry, but we can't take both of you," they said. "We thought one of you could stay with us, and the other could go to a foster home or shelter." I understood the situation, but I knew being separated would make things even harder. "Please take care of her. I'll go to the foster home," my brother insisted, sacrificing for me. "I'll be okay. Just because I'm in foster care doesn't mean I won't be looked after," he assured me, holding my hand tightly. He made me feel like I deserved it, like he wanted this for me. As he held my hand, I couldn't help but cry and beg him to stay. The family that took me in didn't seem too thrilled, and I always felt like a stranger in their home, like there was a divide between us. I felt so alone. The shelter where my brother stayed was really far away. It was tough being apart, but we kept in touch by phone whenever we could. Even though I was with my relatives, my brother was my only real family. Without him, I started feeling more and more alone. I've always been sensitive and creative. I love expressing myself and letting my imagination run wild. As I felt lonelier, my emotions got stronger, and I started withdrawing into myself. Through middle and high school, that feeling of loneliness stuck with me. I began pouring my feelings onto paper, crafting imaginative stories that flowed naturally from my mind. When I shared some of my writing with my brother, he praised it and urged me to keep going. He said, "This is something special." After graduating, I dove into job hunting. With my passion for reading, I landed a job at a small publishing company that focused on literary magazines. If it had been a bigger company, I might not have applied, not because I wasn't qualified, but because it wouldn't have felt right for me. I put everything I have into my writing. It's kind of an obsession for me. I wanted to show my gratitude to the family who took me in and reassure my brother that I'm doing fine. Starting my first job was tough, and I made my fair share of mistakes, but I kept pushing myself, and before I knew it, 5 years had flown by. At the time, I was working in the editorial department, assisting one of the top writers. This writer had real talent and even won an award for his work. As his editor, I did my best to help him whenever he hit a roadblock. I shared my creative insights and gave feedback to help him improve. When my boss praised me, saying, "Natalie, I don't know what I'd do without your creative mind," it felt incredible. We had a strong bond in our working relationship, and then he surprised me by saying, "Natalie, you're not just the perfect partner at work, but in life too. Will you marry me?" I was totally caught off guard by his proposal. It was unexpected, especially since we hadn't openly dated or been romantically involved. But considering how close we were from working together, we knew a lot about each other. So I said, "Yes, I want to spend forever with you," and it just felt right. My brother was thrilled about our wedding. We hadn't spent much time together since we lived apart, so I couldn't wait to see him again. My husband understood how important it was for me to reconnect with my brother, and he was looking forward to meeting him too. My husband told me about his involvement with the shelter and the kids there. He didn't just contribute financially, he was actively mentoring and supporting the children. "There's one kid in particular who really stands out," he said. "He's driven and hardworking, and he even calls me Big Bro." He was glowing with pride, and I couldn't help but feel proud of him too. 2 years into our marriage, we were getting ready to welcome a new addition to our family. My husband's writing was gaining recognition, and he credited it to my advice and support. "Thank you for always believing in me. I love you," he'd say, making me feel so appreciated. Our daughter, Nicole, was born, and our lives were filled with joy and excitement. She was bursting with energy, and we were over the moon. One day, as I looked in the mirror, I realized that the loneliness and sadness I once felt had vanished. I smiled at my reflection, feeling grateful for everything I had overcome. Nicole blossomed into a kind and bright child. Before we knew it, my husband and I decided to enroll her in a private school. We found one that focused on nurturing independent and creative thinkers, offering a well-rounded education in academics, athletics, and the arts. Nicole thrived in that environment. Our careers were going well too. But when Nicole started 4th grade, we received devastating news about my husband. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and it had already spread too far for treatment by the time we found out. We went to the hospital together, but I returned home alone. I stayed by his side, praying for a miracle, but it wasn't meant to be. I was scared that the loneliness I once felt would return, but this time I had Nicole. I had to stay strong for her. I changed my mindset and focused on moving forward. Nicole and I leaned on each other for support as we faced life without my husband. Every moment became more precious, and I vowed to cherish every second. As Nicole started her final year of elementary school, she was nervous about meeting new classmates and teachers, but she knew she could handle it by the time. As the first semester ended, I noticed Nicole became increasingly quiet about school, especially after spring break. Starting the second semester of 5th grade, she seemed even more distant. My worry grew. Was she not enjoying school? Was she being bullied? But as the second semester neared its end, nothing changed. Today, I had to confront her. I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Hi, I'm Nicole, and I'm in 5th grade. Last year, my dad passed away, and it was really tough for me and my mom. But my uncle helped us through it, and I'm grateful my mom was able to heal. I was excited to start 5th grade, even though I knew I have a new teacher and classmates, except for one friend from last year. Our teacher is 28 and has been teaching for 6 years. He kind of gives off an older, annoying brother vibe. Our teacher wanted to get to know us better, so he had us fill out a get-to-know-me worksheet. Then he planned to interview us individually based on our answers. When it was finally my turn, he said, 'Your favorite subject is English, right?' I love reading too. But then he mentioned my dad's passing and my mom raising me alone, and I didn't like his tone. 'Just wondering, what does your mom do for work?' My mom works as a contract employee at a publishing company. After my dad passed away, she switched from full-time to contract work for the flexibility. I told her she didn't have to, but she prefers it. It's kind of like working part-time. How do you guys afford the school? You must be having a tough time." It felt like my teacher assumed we were barely getting by. It didn't seem sincere. Then he made more comments about our finances, like he pitied us, like we were pathetic. His attitude during that conversation really bothered me, so I tried to avoid him afterward. But he kept approaching me, usually when I was alone, and would say things like, "Struggling with money is stressful, right? Is your mom still working part-time? Can you afford next semester's tuition?" I tried to brush it off and be mature about it. Once, I even argued back, saying we weren't poor, but he didn't stop. So I decided it was best to keep my distance. He laughs and thinks it's because he's right. I decided to stop talking to my mom about school altogether because I didn't want to involve her. I could tell she was getting worried about me. Then, over spring break, my teacher assigned us a book to read, a popular novel by an author named Curie. The main character had a tough childhood but eventually succeeded in life. After class, my teacher approached me when I was alone. That book starts with a rough childhood, which I bet hits close to home for you, he said. But let's be real, life isn't like a fairy tale. People from poor backgrounds usually stay that way. It's a cycle, you know? He laughed and sarcastically apologized for making me read it. I felt so alone and powerless. I couldn't believe he was my teacher. I dreaded going back to school after spring break. I wanted to change my attitude to stop worrying my mom, but my teacher kept picking on me. I couldn't understand why he enjoyed taunting me. I tried ignoring him, but one day I couldn't take it anymore and snapped back. He was speechless at first, then angry. As he walked away, he muttered, "You're a feisty one, aren't you? I'll remember this." That's when I realized I should have just ignored him. At the end of the school year, there's this big 5th grade field trip everyone's excited about, even though it's not happening yet. People in class started buzzing about it, and once again, the teacher singled me out. Those school trips are pricey, especially compared to public schools. "Wonder if you'll have to sell the house to afford it," he said with a smirk. "I'm looking forward to it, but hey, don't sweat it if you can't make it. It's a luxury, and you've got more important things to worry about. Better to stay home." He even hinted it would be better for the school if I didn't go, like payback for snapping at him. Then there was this incident where a classmate's Nintendo Switch went missing. The teacher insinuated that kids from poor families might have stolen it out of jealousy, looking straight at me. My friend started asking questions, but I kept quiet to avoid his smart remarks. Later, when we were discussing middle school plans, the teacher suggested I reconsider staying at the private school. He doubted my mom could afford it and suggested we look into public school instead. He kept belittling us, saying it's stupid to stretch beyond our means. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the conference, tears streaming down my face. I was so frustrated with him. When I got home, my mom sat me down and asked what was really going on, so I told her everything. I was speechless hearing my daughter's words. I couldn't believe she'd been dealing with harassment at school, especially from her teacher. She didn't want me to worry, so she kept it all inside. I hugged her tight, apologizing for not knowing. I knew I had to talk to the teacher right away. I decided to record our conversation on my phone, just in case. "I assumed you'd be working hard, just like I am." His response confirmed my daughter's story. I demanded to know why he felt entitled to speak so horribly to Nicole. It was my duty as a parent to make her aware, even though it should be his job as a teacher, a responsibility he seemed to overlook. He had the audacity to suggest we send Nicole to public school if we were struggling financially, but he was wrong. We've never faced financial instability in our lives. His assumptions about our situation were unfounded. He kept interrupting and talking over me, making it impossible for us to have a civil conversation. His immature remarks pushed me to my limit. I warned him sternly, "That's enough. Don't ever speak to my daughter like that again, or there will be consequences." With that, I stormed out, leaving him speechless. After our confrontation, Nicole said he stopped bothering her altogether. I was surprised she let it go so easily, but thankfully, she made it through to graduation unscathed. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the parent-teacher conference afterward. Nicole confidently chose to attend the same middle school as her friends, despite the teacher's mocking laughter. "I'm here with my sister for my niece's graduation," Joseph said, suddenly realizing that Nicole was his niece, and then recognizing me as his sister. It was time for me to set the record straight. My late husband was a renowned writer, and we still receive royalties from his work. We're financially secure because of that. Plus, I have my own steady income. He was stunned. "The author Kiri, whose work inspired you and whom you admired, is actually me. It's a pseudonym I used. You can imagine the royalties from that alone." My husband and I enjoyed collaborating, but I also wanted to pursue my own writing. After his passing, I shifted to a more flexible job to focus on my writing full-time. I poured my heart into my writing, and as I continued, I improved. I couldn't have stopped working altogether, but I enjoy the company and value the routine. That's how I finally completed my book. Joseph saw parallels between his upbringing and the author's story, but instead of overcoming his past, he projected his resentments onto others, including my daughter. He wrongly assumed my family was struggling and belittled us. Such behavior is unacceptable, especially from a teacher. He's not fit for the role. He didn't respond and instead broke down in tears in front of everyone. My brother reported him to the principal, leading to Joseph's swift termination. I provided the principal with recorded evidence of my confrontation with Joseph, which left my brother speechless upon hearing. He expressed disappointment in Joseph's true character and doubted Joseph's ability to continue teaching with such behavior. I realized I had misjudged him. Don't worry. People like him are rare, otherwise the world would be doomed. I hope I never become like that. My brother chuckled at Joseph's behavior. You should focus on your own happiness now. I'm content, and you don't need to worry about me. Maybe it's time for you to start dating. What about you? You could date and be even happier. As long as you're happy, I'm happy. But a new dad? My daughter is wise beyond her years. She's my happiness. Why do we feel so alone? Is it in our minds, or do we close ourselves off from seeing the beauty around us? The answer lies within our hearts.